Welcome to this week's episode of 0 to a Million, brought to you by Unstack. I'm your host, Zach Rego. Today I'm joined by Parker Stevenson, co-owner and chief business officer at Evolve Finance, a bookkeeping agency that specializes in helping online entrepreneurs to build a more profitable and financially stable online business. Parker, thank you so much for joining me today.
Zach, I'm happy to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
No, I love it. We're talking bookkeeping and finances, which is, as I mentioned, something I'm very passionate about. I said that sarcastically, but you said yourself, not everyone's interested in it, and that's great for business. So I appreciate you coming on to chat about some things that I think we can make fun and that will be super helpful for our audience.
I agree 100%.
Cool. So I think one thing we want to dig into, and you work with a lot of folks that are running online businesses, is who's your core customer? So who are you really working with most often and digging into their financial modeling today?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of, and I can't take credit for this. My business partner, Corey Whitaker, who's our chief operating officer, he had the foresight to kind of get into this burgeoning online space where kind of regular people who maybe never had any business aspirations all of a sudden found themselves with the opportunity to run an online business. And when I say online business, we're usually talking about lifestyle-based businesses that you can run from your home. And that's obviously thanks to the internet, because you don't really have to have the same overhead expenses, operating expenses that you would have to if you were starting a restaurant. Like, that's example I always like, because you have to have money to start a restaurant, and it's a very risky endeavor, right? Because you have to buy the inventory and hire all the people and rent out the space before you even open your doors. And so my business partner was kind of by accident fell into the online space and then just really doubled down on it, that by the time I got into the company and we partnered up, that, I mean, we only work with people who are selling courses and membership sites and coaching programs or online services. We do have clients who have SaaS companies, self-funded, and also some influencers and stuff like that. So a lot of our clients are in the business of selling information or selling some sort of a service online in a very scalable way, and usually doing so from their homes, maybe not always in their pajamas, but I'm guessing there's at least 10 to 20% of the time that they are.
Or half of their body is in pajamas.
Exactly. Top might be all business, but
always 50% of the time, 50% of them is in pajamas, which is fine.
Exactly.
So I appreciate the background on that. I think you kind of talk a lot about with finances, right? Equipment, leases, like these are the things that a lot of small business owners historically were thinking about. Online businesses have costs associated with them. I think most of those are typically tied to marketing. And I think marketing today, for the most part, is all digital. We still have billboards and signage out in the world, but for the most part, how do you advise your clients on either scaling through marketing, or have they come to you already with marketing initiatives that have helped them scale?
Well, yeah. So our clients, by the time they come to us, they're already making at least $100,000 a year in revenue. And I feel like that's a pretty, kind of important milestone in your business to be able to cross that $100,000 mark, because that's usually when you're getting to a level, depending on your profitability, that you can probably quit your job, you're making a full-time income off of your business, and you're having to start to actually pay attention to some of these metrics and some of these numbers. Now, what's interesting about our clients' businesses is the marketing, because let me start here. Like, I came from the corporate world. Like, you paid for views, right? Like, sure, social media worked, and I worked for Adidas, and one of the largest brands in the world. And there's some benefits to that, but also most corporations have to spend significant amounts of money in order to, do online advertising, maybe more classic media advertising, TV, radio, magazines, publications, all that kind of stuff. Well, the kind of clients we're working with, I mean, we have clients who build podcasts. They maybe have some blog posts that take off. They're able to really great community builders on social media. Maybe they have some really good SEO because they have a super targeted audience that's found them, and there's not a lot of competition there. So a lot of our clients have usually figured out some way to build an audience through more organic means. And then as they start to take advantage of those organic means, then they might start to spend more money on advertising. But usually if they're going to start spending money on advertising, if they really have no idea what they're doing, they're going to go out and either hire a consultant, or they're going to take a course or a program and learn some metrics around it, because your marketing, obviously, like as soon as you start spending money on advertising, that's financial, right? Far more financial than you'd get into if you had good SEO. But at the same time, as you know, Zach, there's a lot of individualized marketing metrics that aren't necessarily tied to dollars that it's really important you have in place before you even start thinking about like the financial aspect of it. That what we're not experts on marketing metrics. I imagine that's more your expertise, Zach, but that's where we like to encourage our clients to be like, please don't blindly just spend money on Facebook ads because you heard that's the thing to do. Have a plan, have processes, and make sure you have the software in place in order to track the metrics you need to be tracking to make sure that your advertising is actually being productive.
So these digital businesses, right? These are in some cases accidental entrepreneurs, which we've talked a lot to on this podcast, and they don't always have a system or a strategic process in place for like making finances easy to manage, making that data to them accessible so that they know, double down here, create this service, pull back on time I'm investing here. How do you help clients make managing their finances easier and stress-free? And how can our listeners maybe steal some ideas from you on that?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is just getting the data organized in a way that makes sense for their business. And so if you're kind of new in the business world, or even if you've been in the business world for a while, without generalizing too much, I think the financial services industry hasn't really done a great job of educating and helping their customers to understand what's the role finance plays, what's the role accounting and bookkeeping plays, and how does that help you make better business decisions. So a lot of the times, most business owners will just go, all right, do the books, and I'm just going to ignore this and hope I'm just making more money than I'm spending. And unfortunately, that's not really the best way you want to be running your business. We want to have feedback. We want to have something going, hey, business owner, keep doing more of this, or hey, business owner, this isn't working. You need to do something different. And that's essentially what your profit and loss statement is supposed to do from a financial standpoint, because your profit and loss statement is going to be how much money do we have coming in for a specific period of time. That could be for the most current month, it could be for the most current quarter, or it could be year to date. But how much money have we brought in terms of revenue? What have we spent money on? How much have we spent on our expenses? And what do we have left over as profit? It's really that easy. It really is. We have money coming in, we have money going out, what's left over? But the way you organize these expenses, the way you show the revenue on your profit and loss statement, that's what good bookkeeping does. And that's what we do for our clients, is we're helping to just not track what's your total sales by offer, in terms of the expenses, not just, okay, we spent X amount of dollars on contractors. It's like, well, we spent X amount of dollars on these different departments of contractors in your business, right? So we start to get the insights into, okay, where's this money going? And a lot of bookkeepers and accountants set up their clients to just have the financial side of their businesses be about getting the taxes done, because to be fair, like paying your taxes is pretty damn important, and you want to make sure that that's being taken care of. But I think sometimes they underestimate how important it is for business owners to, just like a CEO of a larger corporation, have some sort of financial data, some sort of financial insight that gives them feedback on, am I making good decisions? Am I making not so good decisions? Or where are my priorities based on what these numbers are telling me? So the way we organize the data for our clients just helps them to understand what these numbers are trying to tell them about their businesses. And we have some educational aspects about our service that makes us very different than other bookkeeping firms. But the reason we believe our clients can understand their numbers is because we do the hard work of organizing the data so that it actually means something to the business owner. But once we've organized it, then learning how to interpret it actually becomes very easy, because our clients' business models are so straightforward, but we have to have that foundational financial organization piece. Like, how are we categorizing these transactions makes sense. And if we're doing our job there, then the rest of it becomes pretty straightforward, because the metrics you need to be paying attention to are going to be pretty clear cut.
So let me drop a scenario here of like a business that we've explored here at Unstack, let's say, hypothetically.
Cool.
So we've got 3 products that we charge for. We've got a course, which is basically a marketing academy. This is, again, hypothetical, that we charge, say, $200 to get access to. We've got a software that's a monthly recurring revenue model, and we've got a service that's a monthly recurring revenue model. How would you structure the P&L to mirror, or I guess break down those three items? And then I think the other piece is the entry point for our business in that case would be the academy, right? The $200, you get these great courses on marketing. So a lot of our marketing dollars would be dedicated to driving demand to that, but that's the entry point to everything else down the line. Something we've talked a lot about here internally is like, how do we market this? What's our funnel, right? Where should we focus on driving these? I'd love your insights on how you break down the P&L to kind of look at each of those items and where you allocate the marketing dollars to say, hey, I spent to acquire here, and here's the downward effect in the business.
So I don't know if my answer is going to frustrate you or actually provide some insight here. But if we had a client who had a course, had a software as a service, and also had an actual one-on-one customer service as well on top of that, we would likely need to have a conversation around their overarching business model. So the reason I say this is because there is one universal truth that we have seen over and over and over again in our clients' businesses. If you try to sell too many different things, your revenue will be capped and your profitability will suffer. So the reason I say this is because, okay, maybe the course is like your entry point. That's great. If you want that course to be the entry point that then leads you into the software, awesome. That's relatively straightforward. But then when you throw this service on top of it, now it's like you need to have a whole team that's supporting the software, which is already expensive enough as it is. Then you need to have a whole team that's supporting the service, which is going to be expensive because services mean people are doing work for other people, which is expensive. I would know something about that because I run a bookkeeping firm. And then the course, while it might be the least expensive thing to manage, it's going to have some expenses as well. And so what I think, especially for some of those business owners listening to this right now or aspiring entrepreneurs who are like, I'm going to take on the world and I'm going to have this big offer, our most successful clients get clear on one main offer and learn how to sell the crap out of it before they ever add anything else in. So if we were looking at a profit and loss statement and we're showing, okay, here's how much revenue we have coming in from these three, honestly, very different revenue streams, then we'd likely be looking at, okay, well, let's take a look at the labor. And because I would almost guarantee that the labor is going to be one of the most expensive pieces of this business. And how good are you guys at internally in your business tracking what people are doing, what work for which part of the business? And then also the advertising, because in order to build up a software as a service business, you're likely going to need to be making sure you have a steady stream of customers coming in order to keep that software as a service monthly recurring revenue going. So when you start to look at the amount of advertising and the amount of labor, I'd be willing to guess this business is not going to be very profitable or it's going to be struggling with cash flow. So that's where, if there's a lesson to kind of be learned, I'm kind of answering your question here, Zach, but I'm going in another direction. What we found is that if you try to do too much too fast, because we only have limited resources, right? Like as small business owners, we only have so much time, we only have so much money, and we only have so many team members to help us, that if we try to do too much too quickly, like it doesn't matter how you track the finances, this business model is probably not going to work to have essentially three businesses in one. But what the numbers might tell us is drop the service and double down on that software, because the software is crushing it. Operationally, it's more streamlined and it's more scalable. Let's do that first, and maybe you revisit the service down the road. So it's not always about, oh, where do we need to cut expenses? Sometimes our P&L or our finances will tell us we need to fundamentally rethink what we're selling and how we're selling it. Does that kind of make sense?
No, I love it. You answered on my side of that argument, actually. So it was
Perfect.
a hypothetical situation, but if it wasn't, you would have answered on my side of it. So when you're talking to your clients, we talked about P&Ls, but what other financial reports should online business owners be looking at? I think P&Ls are really important, but there are obviously other drains on a business or services. The one that we just talked about, potentially eliminating. How should people be kind of analyzing these reports and really digging into them?
Yeah, I mean, the profit and loss statement is kind of it. Like, again, the types of businesses we're working with is they're so straightforward. The business models are so straightforward that there's not a lot of need because the types of businesses we're working with are super profitable, right? Like if you were to look at one of our clients selling courses or coaching, we're expecting them to have 30% profitability or better. That's after all of their expenses, including maybe some write-offs that the business owner gets to write off through the business. We would still expect them to be at 30% or better. So that means if they're doing $1 million a year, we would expect at least $300,000 in profit after all expenses are considered. And we have clients who are able to do 40, 50, 60% profitability and beyond. It's not always super common to be over 50%, but it's possible with the types of businesses our clients are running. So it always starts off with that profitability. And if profitability is good, then chances are cash flow is not going to be an issue. And the other piece that we recommend for our clients is that they save up 3 months of operating expenses in the business. Because if you have 3 months of operating expenses saved up, that gives you a 3-month runway to deal with the ups and downs of running a small business because, like a pandemic might happen and you don't know what the next 3 months are going to look like. That's where having that cushion can be really helpful, especially as your business gets more established and revenue becomes a little more consistent. Obviously, if you're just starting your business, we're not expecting you to have 3 months of operating expenses. But again, once you start to cross that 6 figures in revenue a year mark, that's when starting to save some money up becomes a big deal. And what that does is eliminates the need to have like fancy cash flow reports and some of the other more sophisticated finance reports that might be super commonplace for a big corporation. But again, being small businesses, we need to keep our finances as simple as possible and keep our business models as simple as possible, because the more complex it gets, the more expensive it's going to be to support this. So with our clients, if they have a profit and loss statement, there's another report called the balance sheet. It tends to not be super important for small businesses because usually by the time they look at it, it's probably out of date. Like if you want to know the balance in your checking account, go log into the checking account or your PayPal account or wherever it is. But the only other piece I would add in there is actually a forecast and budget. Now, it's not necessarily a report your bookkeeper would generate for you. This is something that we want all of our clients to build internally. And the reason I want this done internally in the business and not paying someone externally like your bookkeeper or accountant to do it is because a forecast and budget is doing two things. It's trying to predict how much money do we think we're going to bring in the future and how much expenses do we think we're going to take on in the future. So it's just trying to predict what do we think is going to happen in the next month, next quarter, next 6 months, next 12 months. And so if you can, maybe someone helps you do, put together a spreadsheet, and we actually give away a free forecast and budgeting tool on our website through a workshop called Know Your Numbers Now. So that's a link we can give everybody, Zach, if they want to use our forecast and budgeting tool. But in essence, it's going through the work of thinking about, okay, what do we need to hit every month from a sales target? Actually writing that in a spreadsheet and figuring out month by month for the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, how much money do we need to hit on a monthly basis, which I think is a really important exercise to go through. I think a lot of the times entrepreneurs just go, I'll just make as much money as we can and see what happens. And it's like, if you talk to any really good sales professional, they're not just winging it and seeing how much money they can make. They have clear goals set for how much money they're going to generate on a monthly basis, and they hold themselves accountable to that. And then if you have a budget underneath that going, okay, this is what I'm spending on team, this is what I'm spending on advertising, this is what I'm spending on software, then you can literally start to paint a picture of how profitable can this business be if your projections work out. And we've just found that when our clients do that, they're more clear on their goals and they're more clear on the direction and vision they're trying to take the business, instead of just kind of like hoping money comes in and hoping they're not spending too much money and just seeing what happens at the end of the month. Like that's the sort of intention and focus a good like spreadsheet, just forecast and budgeting tool can do for a business.
No, I love that. Everyone should download that. I mean, I think as a salesperson, as a sales leader, right, I used to spend a lot of time with my reps on what do you have coming in, next week, 2 weeks out, and then a lot of time inspecting that too. So asking questions that they should have the answers to if they're telling me that's going to happen in 2 weeks. And I think that's something business owners don't spend enough time on. It's easy to say this is what we're going to hit. It's a lot more challenging to actually inspect whether or not you're going to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, I mean that's where again, you as the business owner knows all the things going on in the business, right? Especially when you're in the initial phases, that having to bring another person in and explain to them what's going on, they're not in your business day to day. But you as the business owner, you know what kind of leads you have, you know how your marketing's going, you know how your social media engagement's been, right? You know what's going to be reasonable to set targets for yourself. And those targets should be achievable. Like if you've just started your business and go, we're going to do 2 million this year. And it's like, well, why do you think that? Well, it just would be awesome to do that. Well, of course it would be awesome to do that. But what's your plan to get there? Which I'm sure you had many conversations, Zach, with your sales team around, well, let's pick a number that we can work back from. That number should be reasonable based on where you're at, but should also be slightly uncomfortable. Something where you go, ooh, I got to really think how we're going to get here. But it's like not demoralizing and you're going, all right, I might as well shut my business down in 3 months because there's no way I'm going to hit that.
Right. Right. So as people scale, do you see their expenses scale with revenue? Because I do, I think courses, like, those are evergreen assets. Like, I create it once and I might update it, but more often than not, it's creating incremental revenue every day that it's living and breathing, hopefully. But do you find that your clients are constantly increasing expenses as their revenue increases, or does the profitability go up and expenses stay, the same?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. No one's ever actually asked me that in quite that phrasing, which I love. With a straight course-based business, if there's no real live element to it or any service element to it, then what tends to happen is a course can kind of take off, and and a business owner can kind of be accidentally profitable for a year because they're like, holy crap, they're just trying to keep up with all the sales they're making and the customer service inquiries and all the new engagement that they're getting. And if a lot of that's coming organically and they're not, or they're getting a lot of success from a minimal amount of ad spend, then they can be wildly profitable. But then usually the workload increases so quickly that then they start to overhire and overcompensate because they're kind of freaking out, and then their expenses will kind of go all like up really quickly all at once instead of it being a gradual thing. And so then maybe they have to do some course correction and they have to go, okay, maybe I overhired, maybe we need to build some better systems and processes in the business so we can work more efficiently. And then they'll kind of like balance it out. Otherwise, if you are a business that's scaling with advertising, like maybe you had some good organic traffic to begin with, you were able to build up your business organically, and now we're relying on an evergreen funnel, then if your revenue goes up, chances are it's because your ad spend is also going up. So it's more about, is the ratio of ad spend to revenue generated from that ad spend in a healthy place, which is what we're striving for. How do we get the best return on our investment from every dollar we spend on ad spend? But that's something where, that type of business with that sort of marketing channel is going to see their advertising expenses increase as their revenue increases. Now, if you look on the flip side of a business like we have at Evolve Finance, like we have to hire people before we bring on clients. We have to kind of get ahead of that. So our expenses are going to increase very gradually, because for every 50 clients we bring on, we might have to hire 2 or 3 people along the way. So then that becomes a little more predictable and easy to see. So this is why I think it's so important that you understand what your business model is, because each online business as a whole, or the online industry as a whole, is kind of a general business model, but there are, depending on if you have a coaching program, a course, software as a service, whatever it is, it's just really important you kind of understand, how does your business model work and what sort of expenses will fluctuate as your revenue grows versus which expenses might kind of stay the same and you don't have to worry about those quite as much.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the services business. I had an interview maybe 6-7 episodes ago with Ralph Foles, who was my former boss and a SaaS CEO for a long time, but he started as a services CEO for a consulting business he had owned. And he talks a lot about like the gradual increase. He's like, it's a lot easier to scale a services business because you hire as you are pursuing projects or gaining projects. So you kind of always know who you need to fill for roles. And then with a SaaS business, he was like, all of a sudden I had a bunch of money, I had to spend it and grow. And we had to hire ahead of plan to get to our plan. And he was like, it became very challenging to manage that. And that's part of the challenge that I think can happen. And you kind of mentioned, you see that spike in revenue and you believe that that's kind of your new benchmark that you need to live by. And it's not always going to be that way. Hopefully it is, but more often than not, there is a pullback. So I think that's something all founders should be, thinking about and really be cautious to overhire too fast, because that is something that can be super challenging.
And I think a lot of what you're talking about here, Zach, is risk management. And I think, understanding the risk of the type of business model you're building. If you're, for instance, we might have clients who have a low cost membership site. They have to do volume. So the risk is if my ads aren't working and we're not pumping the volume we need into this, we're going to have a rough month. Versus maybe we have a client where it's they don't do the volume and they have a higher price point, maybe coaching program or something like that. There's still some risk there, but if they know where to find their customers, then they don't have to do as much volume, which means there's a little less pressure on their sales and marketing to have to hit these huge numbers. And I think software is a big one, right? Where it's you kind of have so many big upfront expenses to build out a piece of software and then find who the hell wants to use the software and how do I get people into it, that you front load a lot of that risk. And if it actually pays off, then I feel like you kind of hit a point where you're you got momentum, things are moving, and that risk kind of gets mitigated. But the more your business model relies on you putting a bunch of money and a bunch of work up front, before you really have any customers, like a restaurant, which is why restaurants are such risky businesses and so many of them fail. I think it's just important to make sure you're kind of mitigating that. You're comfortable with the level of risk you're taking with the type of business you're running, and you feel like either you or the people you're hiring have the skills necessary to make sure you're getting a return on investment for the money and time you're putting up front.
It's funny. I just launched a mobile golf simulator business, and
You did?
a lot of money up front.
Yeah. Oh, dude. We got to talk about that later. I'm a big golf addict. And I worked in the golf industry. I worked for Adidas Golf and TaylorMade for many years. So that's an offline conversation we got to have.
I need help with my finances. I'm managing it all by myself right now. We just launched. We're literally profitable in our first month, so I'll take it.
Hey, that's a good start.
It's a side hustle, but we'll see if it can actually produce money. My buddy's running it, so we'll see what happens. But Parker, thank you so much for joining me. A lot of great insights. We have one last question we ask every guest. 2 books you recommend every founder reads and a founder or entrepreneur reads.
So you gave me, we're going to take the wall down here and say, Zach told me he was going to ask me this question. I was like, well, shoot, what business books am I going to think about? And so I think I'm going to do 2 things here. Number one, the first one, I think you can see it behind me. I was a big fan of Traction by Gino Wickman. I don't know if it's a business book everyone from the very start of your business needs to read, but I have a business partner and our business is, we're not new. We've been doing this for 10 years, so we have a stable revenue. But what we found is building out teams and delegating work and how do you build a culture and how do you track the right things? Everyone gets so concerned with how do I make money and how do I find customers in the early stages. That is totally reasonable. That's exactly what you need to figure out is how do you generate revenue on a monthly basis. And but once you kind of figure that out and revenue starts to get a little more consistent, at least, it never probably feels as consistent as any business owner wants. But you're not so much worried about, are you going to sell anything every month? Well, now you have a team and you have this culture and you have so much more work that needs to get done, that we found Traction to be just such a great starting framework. And even for me coming from the corporate world, that's helpful, but a small business is different. We don't have a finance department. We don't have an HR department. We don't have a product department and a marketing department and all that. So we found that book to be really helpful for helping us build out the structure for a small business. But then on the flip side here, I would say so much of entrepreneurship is how much do you have your act together personally, right? How much self-awareness do you have? Are you mindful of how you come across and the perceptions that you create based on how you interact with other people? And that's where I feel like a lot of the books I read around Buddhism, at least for me, and reading stuff from the Dalai Lama, pretty much any Dalai Lama book you can't go wrong with, because while it's not related to business, I think we've seen so many business owners fail because they're not mindful of how their actions affect those around them and affect their environment. And they're not self-aware enough to know where their strengths and weaknesses are. That I think a lot of what the Dalai Lama and Buddhism, and I'm not trying to push Buddhism or religion here on anybody, but I think just meditation and mindfulness in general, has been so important for me to make sure that I'm able to see my actions and make sure that I'm self-correcting when maybe I'm not on a great path, and do the best I can to have great experiences with our clients, great experiences with our team, and great experiences with my business partner as well.
Love it. No, those are great recommendations. Traction's been a good one. It's dense. It's hard to get through, but there's a lot of workbooks and worksheets in there that help you formulate your ideas and get them on paper, which I think is super helpful. And the mindfulness thing's interesting. I'm reading Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans or something like that, which is basically like excerpts from 400 podcast episodes with his best guests and all sorts of really interesting insights. But a lot of it is on, well, taking drugs, mindfulness, meditation, all sorts of interesting strategies. But it's been really interesting to hear about how people and entrepreneurs and really successful executives manage some of that stuff, and where they learned it from too. You know, there was a failure at some point that made them shift how they're managing not only their team but their personal relationships with and culture. And I think that's really interesting.
Well, and I've seen how bad leadership can ruin departments, ruin companies, ruin cultures. That whether it's reading a book, going to therapy, working with a business coach, whatever it is, learning self-awareness, learning how to understand yourself better. You need it, especially as your business grows. If you have really high aspirations, figure out your head as soon as you possibly can.
It's funny you say that. Dave Balter, an interview we did a while back, said there's like scaling in threes. So when you get to 3 employees, it's easy to manage business as a first-time founder. When you get to 9 employees, it becomes increasingly more difficult. When you get to 27 employees, it becomes increasingly more difficult. And because it always adds new layers. And you as a leader need to become more emotionally intelligent to manage that. So you're spot on, because it's when there are 3 people sitting around a table, it's really easy to fight and get over it. When there's 9 people, it permeates. When there's 27, you're really screwed. So get on it early.
We felt that ourselves. We're now at 15 full-time employees in our company. And my business partner and I have definitely been doing some work because I love it. I love running a team. I love being in a position of leadership. I love getting to grow a business, but I'll be damned if it's not one of the most difficult things I have ever had to do. So whatever support you need to do to get that feedback, whether it's reading a book or mindfulness or meditation or therapy, whatever you got to do. If you have a quickly growing business, get it figured out. Do what you got to do to get your head right.
Nothing worse than losing a good employee.
Oh, for sure.
So, Parker, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can everyone find you that's listening?
Yeah, so evolvedfinance.com is the best place to go. EVOLVED, evolvedfinance.com. Like I said, we have a great free workshop on the website where we give you a free budgeting and forecasting tool for your business, as well as a personal budgeting tool, because your personal finances can have a huge effect on your business as well if you're not paying attention. And then I also have a podcast where it's just me talking for 15 to 20 minutes about some of these kind of less talked about aspects of running a business, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, usually in some way or another kind of tied into finance. So it's a great place to kind of get more familiar with the financial side of running a business if that's still feeling pretty new to you.
Awesome. Love it. Parker, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Zach.